not quite the top of the world, but it's pretty much the top of the Swartland, and it's one of the better views in South African wine. Around me, the vineyards of Porseleinberg and the Syrah made by Mullineux, one of the original Swartland young guns and one of South Africa's most iconic wines of modern times. Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows, and welcome to Porseleinberg, where I'm going to be spending a morning hanging out with Mullineux and finding out how somebody who makes just one wine is able to be seen as one of South Africa's great winemakers. And that sits in the context of a region full of great winemakers. In fact, over the last few days, I've caught up with Andrea Mullineux and also with Adi Badenhorst, along with Chris Mullineux and Eben Sadi, were those original 5 Swartland revolutionaries who now, more than a decade on, are seeing a new wave of young winemakers come through. People like Martin Lamprecht and Saki Mouton and guys like Jasper Wickens, and to see them following in the footsteps of the greats like Cully is a wonderful transition in terms of the South African winemaking story. And it's that story that we're hoping to support on the show this week, because we will be handing over a rather special presentation to not just Andrea Mullineux, but also to the chair of the Cape Winemakers Guild, Samantha O'Keefe from Lismore, and Louis Strydom from Ernie Els, and finding out from them, along with Gaynor Fredericks, now at Mullineux, but a former protege of the Cape Winemakers Guild Trust, just why the platform they have is so important for South African wine. Also coming up on the show today, I'm in Tulbagh, where I catch up with a young man called Adriaan with some big shoes to fill and just 2 wines to make at the Rijk's estate that now, more than 2 decades on, is establishing itself as a premium home of both Pinotage and Chenin Blanc. That is a little later, though. First, down to Roundstone, the Mullineux farm, where we meet some really important members of the Cape Winemakers Guild Trust, give them some good news, and find out just why the future of South African winemaking looks so good. This is Roundstone. It's the original home of Mullineux. Chris and Andrea, who've done so much to redefine South African wine over the last decade or two. Their roles are not just confined to wine, though, because Andrea is a member of the Cape Winemakers Guild and a former chair. And the work that she's done with the rest of the guild in transforming South African wine and giving opportunities to young people through the Protege program is extraordinary. And so it's an appropriate place to be here today, not just with Andrea, but with the current chair of the Cape Winemakers Guild, Samantha O'Keefe from Lismore, along with the man who's charged with the trust and the development of young people in the industry, Louis Strydom from Ernie Els, to find out from them why this trust and why the guild and the work it does are so important. And then, in partnership with Norman Goodfellows, to hand over a cheque that we hope is going to help the next generation of young South African winemakers take this incredible industry even further.
So the Cape Winemakers Guild is an organization that's made up of some of South Africa's top winemakers. We come together to share knowledge and inspiration and generally friendship and professional help. It is an organization currently made up of 42 members. They must be nominated, and the criteria for nomination is that they need to be basically at the top of their game worldwide for 5 years, making some of not just South Africa's top wine, but the world's top wines. In addition to the support and the camaraderie that we bring, we also have a commitment to the future of South Africa and bringing diversity and social justice into the industry as well. And through that, we have the Cape Winemakers Guild Protege program, which is to really support future leaders of the industry. And I'm very pleased that we're here today to show that support.
For me, the Cape Winemakers Guild just represents really the top winemakers in South Africa, and it's never been a more exciting time for both established and aspiring winemakers in South Africa. The upward trajectory is seen in the quality of the wines, the amazing establishment and preservation of vineyards, as well as what we're seeing overseas with the incredible demand of South African wines, especially at the top quality level. And the Cape Winemakers Guild really are the leaders in what we're seeing out there.
You know, people skills development, I think, is core of what the trust is really all about. And it's about giving the young winemakers the opportunity to hone their skills and to learn about more. So academically, these young winemakers are obviously at their prime. They've just finished their BSc degree, but now is to implement this academic expertise that they've got. And I think that is what the Protege offers these young aspirant winemakers, is giving them a 3-year program where they actually spend 1 year at a winery, go through the whole process. It's not about only making wine, it's about what happens after you've made the wine, the process of barrel maturation, the process of blending, bottling, and just the whole admin of the winery. And then that is the skill that from a professional perspective, these young winemakers need to learn.
I've immersed myself in the South African wine business, and I feel that it runs through my veins. It is what I wake up thinking about and I'm excited about. So whether it's being in the vineyards or trying a new wine in the cellar or sharing a wine with a young winemaker that I've watched rise up through the ranks in South Africa, it is just the most exciting time to be in South Africa, the most wonderful country for being an emerging winemaker or being an established winemaker.
I think, it's amazing. I think it's even from year one when these young winemakers come into the program, and I see them just the 3 years that I spend with them within the program, their development and the confidence. And I think once you start understanding what you're doing, you become confident, and that is what we want to achieve with these young winemakers as they develop in the 3 years in the program. And after that, we very much, we want these young winemakers to go out there on their own and create their own career going forward. It's not about us giving them just a step up all the time, but going there to making themselves. And that we see now within the industry being accepted as getting assistant winemaker positions within great wineries such as Mullineux, such as Conde, and such as Duncan Savage, and that is great to see the acceptance by the industry, and even the big corporates like Heineken Beverages and the KWV, where our proteges are working. And I think that is the broad spectrum, and that is the excitement to see. And then everybody's different. Everybody's got their own idea how their career will go. So we have some people that are working in corporate, some people that have their own brands, which is great to see that in the entrepreneurship. So obviously, which everybody, any country needs for economic development, and that is so. That is what we see from these young winemakers.
It's been incredible. I think first and foremost, just as role models, the way that South Africans work together, the way that the older generation works with the younger generation, and now you bring in the proteges. So the young proteges have graduated from university. They have a degree in winemaking when they come into the program. They spend 3 years with a different Cape Winemakers Guild members, so South Africa's top winemakers, in their cellar, working side by side, conflict resolution, professional skills, leadership, soft skills like a driver's license, financial. They learn how to put together business plans and financial skills, presentations, public speaking. They are sent to Toastmasters in order to learn how to public speak. So by the time they come out after 3 years, they have really not only been mentored, they've done an entire harvest overseas, 2 full months in France, but they also have worked with South Africa's best. And so, being a graduate 3 years out of school, they're truly some of the most qualified young people in South Africa. It is so moving for me. Both young women and young men are brought into the program, but during my time in the Guild, we've had top young women in the program. So as a woman looking to mentor the future of South Africa, our female winemakers, it's been very special.
So the Prodigy program enabled me to grow personally as well as professionally. It wasn't just about winemaking. It was being a part of a bigger family, a bigger meaning, if I can call it that. It enabled me to pick up my life skills, pick up my business management skills, and all of that stuff while I'm making wine. So it was really a win-win. In my first year, I worked at Tukara with Miles Mosup at the time. That was just before he had left Tukara. And Miles, he basically taught me how to not be insecure, if that makes sense. He was obviously the first winemaker I had worked with, the first winery I had been in. So it was really a learning curve just to see, how do I do this, the simple tasks. And then I went on to work at the Grendel, which was with Charles Hopkins, and who doesn't love Charles? Such a sweetheart. And there I really just basically built up my skills in analyzing wines and how to run a business. And that was kind of what I picked up from the different winemakers. And then I came to Andrea, Mullineux, which was my last stop, and I'm still here. And I had learned the finer detail and just giving attention to detail and doing things in a manner that you know is correct, but also that speaks to a louder crowd. And that's what I picked up through the 3 winemakers during my 3 years in the Protégé program, but also from other different winemakers in the process of technical tastings and just getting to be in a larger community as well.
So you've already heard from our Cape Winemakers Guild members, including our esteemed chair, just why the guild in itself is so important for the industry, but also why this protégé program, and we've got one of the finest of all the protégés with us, has had such a great impact on the South African wine industry. And that's why, through the Nickel Foundation, Dan Really Likes Wine, supported by the team at Norman Goodfellows, we're so excited to be able to add a little support. And we hope that, guys, this is the first step in a really long journey together. It is with great pleasure. As a starting point, we'd like to hand over 250,000 Rand to the Guild. I know that you guys are going to make that stretch far, far further than we ever could. And when I look at people like Gaynor and I see young South Africans who, without your support, might have had a different path. And from a very selfish perspective, I wouldn't have been able to drink her amazing wine. But what you guys do for young people in South Africa, in our industry, is just so important. So it's a small gesture to start with. We're going to build it over the years. But thank you for allowing us to help you and to support you and to take wine even further in the direction that needs to go. So I hope that helps.
That's amazing. Cheers.
Today, to receive the 250,000 Rand will make a massive impact on a young winemaker which has just come into the program and develop their skills. And that is an investment for today, which we will only see tomorrow. And I think that is what this investment does. Is like sometimes you don't see the rewards immediately, but it's that long-term commitment towards changing the face of our industry and developing the young people as they come in.
So I think the donation that you're giving to the Protégé program will mean so much because so many young people get stuck in not really developing because of the lack of finances and the lack of skills. And I think that you're enabling more people to really develop and help with skills development throughout the Protégé program. So thank you so much, Dan.
The funds that we received today are just so incredible for the Protégé program, and it's going to mean so much to the aspiring winemakers who will be the head winemakers of tomorrow. And because of funds from generous contributors like yourself, it means that we are going to be able to further the program and really give the best experience to these aspiring young winemakers.
Dan, when I came here today, I had no idea that you were going to present us with this check for 250,000 Rand. I don't even think you understand how much that means to the program. It is such a huge portion of our budget, and as we continue to go forward, hopefully you'll come up with even more money through the generosity of your supporters, and I think we'll be able to even add another protégé over time. It really means so much to these young people and gives them opportunities. You know, obviously we're always looking for ways that we can help the protégés grow, and having that in the budget is going to be amazing. Thank you so much.
With people like Samantha and Andrea and Louis involved, the future of the Cape Winemakers Guild Trust is in really good hands. And when you see graduates like Gaynor and what she has done, what others have the potential to do, it gives you a really upbeat sense of the future of South African wine. Now, the present of South African wine is not too bad either. And here at Porseleinberg, the grapes from these very vines, which are freshly harvested, are in the immediate aftermath of the picking season, give us one of the few South African wines to have got 100 points from an international critic. And Porseleinberg was already on the map for many wine drinkers, but that 100 points sent the radar spiraling out to the rest of the wine world. And it's why Lo's status has gone beyond just a Swartland superstar to somebody the whole wine world is very, very aware of. And rightfully so, because beyond a very calm, quiet, relaxed demeanor is somebody who's got a touch of magic in his hands when it comes to wine. And in the coming weeks, you'll see a very special interview with Cully as he looks at the wine that he's making and how this Porseleinberg success story has come to be. And it sits amongst this vast emptiness of the Swartland. There's a real beauty to the place. It's just so quiet, and you feel that you must be thousands of miles from the real world, when in reality you're about an hour's drive from Cape Town. It's really not that far away from the big city, as much as it feels so very far away. Also not that far, about an hour or so from Cape Town, is Tulbagh, and a small wine estate that now, more than 2 decades on, has firmly established an ability to make slightly different expressions of 2 key grapes, 2 key South African grapes. One of those is Chenin Blanc and the other is Pinotage. Chenin Blanc is such a driver of South African white wine. Pinotage is such a driver of debate. Some people absolutely love it, some of them aren't quite so convinced, and often with Pinotage it's a question of style and interpretation. So how is winemaker Adriaan interpreting, and how is he following on from one of the greats of South African wine, his predecessor Pierre, at the cellar at Rijk? Well, we dropped in on the Tulbagh estate to find out. Well, this is the 4th time I've been in Tulbagh, and I'm always charmed by the quaint history of this beautiful little corner of the Western Cape, which is home to some terrific wines. Many people know the bubbles of Krone and Sarensburg, but it's also home to an estate that focuses on just 2 grapes, the Chenin and Pinotage of Rijk, which has now become one of South Africa's more iconic brands. Go through again this focus on Chenin and Pinotage and why it works so well for you here.
Yes, look, obviously when they started out they planted a little bit of everything, but I mean, as time goes by and you learn about your climate and your soil, you get to understand both better, and also you get to learn from the vine. So obviously Tulbagh being quite a warm climate, in the summer, I mean, temperatures reaching 47, 48 degrees. Winter time it cools right back down. And also Pinotage and Chenin Blanc both are picked quite early in the season, so that means we can miss the heat waves, you know, end of Feb, beginning of March. So that's perfect. I mean, it means I don't lose my acid, my pH doesn't go up. I can get all the grapes in safely before the big heat waves.
Tell me what life is like in 48 degrees in Tulbagh trying to still work. I'd be dead.
Yeah. So look, that's also one of the reasons so we harvest at night. Yeah. So we go and pick up the workers at 9:30, bring them back here. We give them all a little headlamp, and we go out into the block. So look, obviously it's twofold. I mean, it's better for wine quality because the grapes are colder. So even if the days are so warm, the night temperatures drop down to about 17, 18, depending on the night. You know, so already the grapes are a lot cooler, and I mean also for the workers, it's a lot better. I mean, would you like to pick at when it's 47 or rather at 17 degrees? You know.
So you've got Chenin Blanc, you've got Pinotage. That's the limit of what you do. So it's what, half days? Go surfing most of the time?
Oh yeah, winemakers only work 1 month of the year. No. So look, we do have a very short, compact harvest. Obviously, with 2 cultivars, it all comes in at the same time. So we're looking at about a month, 6 weeks max. So I mean, this year we finished just before the end of Feb. You know, nice and quick and easy. Well, people call it easy. I mean, there's still farms harvesting. But remember, if you harvest Chenin Blanc and Pinotage only, it's super compact. So I mean, the little sleep that you get is minimal. I mean, this year it wasn't so bad. I think our longest shift was 32 hours. But I mean, there's been previous years where it's 3 9 hours without sleep, you know. So super compact, but super intense.
And results in the two wines that have a variety of interpretations. You do a couple of different things with the wine. Is there for you a style that says this is Tulbagh when it comes to both Chenin and Pinotage?
Look, definitely, and I think that's something that Rijk tries to, you know, show in a bottle, or show in the glass. I mean, we've got four renditions of Chenin Blanc and Pinotage both. Obviously, with the newer style, a little bit more fruit driven, easier drinking, come from younger vines planted low down on the slopes. You know, just to showcase what Chenin can be, you know, light and fresh. It doesn't have to always be serious. And then as you go up in the range, you know, then you start working with these old bush vines, and you really get to see the concentration and the seriousness that Chenin Blanc and these vertical shell soils on Rijks and in Tulbagh can produce. I mean, the same thing with Pinotage. I mean, it doesn't produce the same super robust fruit that you'll get in, for example, Stellenbosch, but the concentration is massive, you know, because the roots are so restricted because of vertical shell soils, you know. So, and what happens in the ground happens at the top, you know. So if your root zone is tiny, I mean the canopy is tiny, and that has an influence on the bunches and the berries as well. So the concentration is massive in the Pinotage as well, and I think it showcases Pinotage in Tulbagh on show.
So the history of Rijks, where does the name come from? And tell me a bit about Neville Dorrington. He sounds like something of a maverick.
Yeah, look, Neville was quite a character. I mean, Neville didn't even finish high school, but from the get-go, you know, he had his goals set and his visions pure. In 1996, he saw this piece of land without any buildings or roads or dams, obviously no vineyards. He visited a mate right next door, and he said he wants to put fruit into a bottle, not fruit into a box. And I mean, back then, the Tulbagh was still quite an Afrikaans town. And I mean, they just all laughed at him and said it's never going to work. So he got all the experts out from Stellenbosch and Winpro and wherever, and they said, no, look, the vertical shell soils are too poor. It's never going to work. Anyway, Neville being Neville, he said, stuff it, I'm still going to plant. I mean, back then we planted a little bit of everything. Obviously, as time went along, we saw what worked. So Neville made the business decision. I mean, brilliant businessman, to only continue with Chenin Blanc and Pinotage. Yeah, so look, Neville's been spearheading this business right from the get-go. I mean, planting all these vineyards, starting the cellar, the first harvest was in 2000. And I mean, we're in 2024 now, and I mean, we're still here, you know.
So with a look at the grapes done, time to head down to the cellar, really important part, some tasting. So by now you know there are only two grapes here. One of them is Pinotage and the other is Chenin Blanc. And the focus for me is really cool because this is our flagship white of South Africa. We're doing it so well. We've already spoken about what you feel makes Chenin special for Tulbagh. Now we're saying what makes it quite so special for Rijk. So what is the range and what are we drinking?
Yeah, so look, first off, you guys have the Touch Chenin Blanc 2023. So you guys will see all three wines are 2023. So it showcases the vintage, but also the different styles, the different techniques used in the vineyard and also in the cellar as well. Next up, private cellar, then reserve, top of the range barrel selection. So let's have a taste then. This one comes from our younger vineyards lower down on the slopes on the farm. Produces a little bit more fruit-driven wines, picked slightly earlier to preserve the acid. Mostly stainless steel fermented, you know. So it's not about being too serious or too focused on the mouthfeel. Beautiful aromatics, fresh fruit, summertime drinking.
Cheers.
Cheers. This comes from our older vines higher up on the slope, so a little bit more vertical shell as opposed to the Touch that comes from a little bit more clay content soils. About 80% barrel fermented and aged, French oak barrels, 300 liters for 14 months, anything between 11 and 14 depending on how the wine develops. And then as soon as we take it out of the barrel, I add a small portion of tank fermented Chenin Blanc just to add a little bit more freshness.
With your second one, in terms of the style, something I've loved about your Chenin over the years is that I'll find a bottle in my cellar and it's 10 years old. I can open it up and it has just developed beautifully. There really is, particularly as you move up the range, I find with your Chenin Blanc, the ability to age wine. You can certainly drink it young, it's got a delightful freshness to it, but it does have that potential.
No, definitely. Look, and I think that's contributed to the soils especially. I mean, because of vertical shell soils, the juice that we work with in the cellar is naturally higher in acid, naturally lower in pH. And I mean, that pH is what it's all about. That helps with the ageability, and then also spending about 14 months in the barrel makes the wine more stable. I mean, so the product that goes into bottle, we try and keep back. This is unfortunately now 2023, but it will show beautifully even in 10 years' time.
All right, 2 down, and happily so. What of number 3, which already, just the moment you look at the packaging, it looks like it's got a little bit more weight and heft to it.
Yeah, so the Rijk's Reserve Chenin Blanc 2023, again, coming from our top 2 blocks of Chenin Blanc on the farm. Again, all the bush vines high up on the hill. Really not a lot of topsoil, so just vertical shale. Small canopies, beautiful bunches, tiny berries, picked at night, minimal settling, straight into barrel, 100% wild yeast fermentation. So yeah, we really try and showcase what happens in the vineyard. Also, especially because since Tiger took over, he's got a different vision for the farm. So during the growing season, we only spray just sustainable products, mostly organic. So that also attributes to what you find on the grape, the yeast on the grapes, what I end up with in the barrel and the cellar as well. So just beautiful. And then after 14 months, Tiger and myself will do the selection.
So the Chenin Blanc selection done, we're halfway there. What remains? A little pinotage. So finishing off, normally hot day like this, a big glass of red wine probably wouldn't be my first choice, but I shall happily make an exception because it is your pinotage and it's something I know well. And it's a pinotage that I feel has got quite an important job to do and story to tell, because there are still chunks of the audience, not just in South Africa, where pinotage is something people shy away from a little. And I think what that comes down to more than anything is often just a misunderstanding of the grape.
Look, I think pinotage have been misjudged in the past, Like I mentioned earlier, certain cultivars have been made for decades and decades and decades, and pinotage being quite a young variety, it takes time for the vineyard to figure itself out in the country, and also for winemakers to figure out what to do with the grape in the cellar, So there were some bad examples made in the past, and it just took time for winemakers to actually learn how to work with this grape variety, how to deal with it, what style to make. I mean, if you look at the current portfolio that's on the market, I mean, there's everything from very lighter hipster pinotage all the way to super blockbuster Stellenbosch pinotages, And I think there's a space for both in the market, but I think the sweet point is right in the middle, You don't have to push a grape to its limit to find out what it truly is, And I think that's what we're trying to do in Tulbagh on Rijk's. Just let the grape shine, let the vineyard speak, let the soil show what it can do, and just make the best pinotage you can do.
Which you do again across a few ranges. Tell me quickly about the pinotage that you have to offer and what sets the 3 apart.
Yeah, so look, we've got the touch range, which is our little bit more introduction range. So again, younger vineyards, picked slightly earlier, handled less aggressively in the cellar as well to get a little bit less extraction. So more focus on your red fruit, less tannin, less serious, beautiful midsummer day lunch drinking. And then you move on to the private cellar and reserve. Now this is where all the bush vines high up on the hill comes into play. With those vines you get a lot more concentration, pick slightly riper, work them a little bit harder in the cellar. They see 22 months in barrel, 300 litres, only French oak, and it really showcases the purity of the fruit, but also the tannin structure and the depth that you can get from pinotage in soil like we get here in Tulbagh, without over extracting, without picking too ripe, just showcasing the vineyard and showcasing the site.
As a winemaker, do you feel, not just here at Rijk's, but generally, that South Africa is starting to get pinotage a lot more right than it used to?
I think slowly but surely. I mean, more and more wine critics from around the world are praising pinotage, or even if they're not praising it, and they are saying positive things about it. I mean, it's not like the pinotage that we made in the 80s and 90s. They were, some were good, some were bad. It's and misses. Like I said, winemakers are learning how to work with pinotage, and I think it shows.
So there's your challenge then on the back of our visit to Rijk's. Do two things for me, if you will, as you wander down the aisles of your local Norman Goodfellows, not just grabbing the Chenin, but also grab some Rijk's Pinotage and give it another chance if you're one of those people for whom Pinotage is something you've never been quite convinced by. I think this could go a long way to changing your mind. But do one better than that. Come down to Tulbagh. It's a charming little town. It's full of fantastic people, and there's some rather nice wine to discover as well. Cheers.
Cheers.
And so, from the beautiful surrounds of Porseleinberg atop the Swartland, that wraps up our show for this week. A big thank you to the Cape Winemakers Guild team, to Samantha and to Andrea and to Louis for allowing us to support the extraordinary work they do with the Trust. And a big thank you to Jason and Barley and the team at Norman Goodfellows for supporting us through the Dan Really Likes Wine charity auction and sending that rather sizable cheque the way of such an important platform in the South African wine industry. Thanks too to Adriaan Jacobs, who's having a great deal of fun out at Rijk's. He's got a beautiful home for his Chenin and for his Pinotage, and he's starting a new journey, following in some big footsteps from Pierre, but doing a terrific job. That wraps us up for this week. We'll see you again next week. This is Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. Goodbye.